Welcome to the Planning Committee. And the first item on your agenda, any apologies for absence?
I've had no apologies, Chair.
Are there any apologies for absence? There are none.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Any members? No? Thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting, to agree to approve and sign those minutes as a correct record. Start at page 1. Page 2. 3. 4. 5. Page 6. And finally page 7. Somebody move those as a true record, please. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Item 4 then, are there any items for deferral or withdrawal?
No items for deferral or withdrawal, thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And moving on to item 5 is the public rights of way. The application to divert the footpath MU5 off Higher Lane in Mumbles. And Jonathan, that's yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This report concerns an application received by the Council under Section 257 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 in respect of a diversion order relating to footpath MU5 at Higher Lane, Mumbles, as shown on the plan attached to your report. The Council may make a diversion order relating to any footpath if it is satisfied that it is necessary to enable development to be carried out in accordance with a granted planning permission. In this case, the applicant was granted planning permission on the 18th of November 2021 for a residential development of 31 dwellings and associated infrastructure at Higher Lane, Mumbles. So the application in front of you today is in respect of the footpath diversion order only, and is not an opportunity to revisit the merits of the original planning application, because that was a separate application. The applicant satisfies the requirements of Section 257, as the diversion is necessary to enable the development to be carried out. The relevant part of the footpath is currently recorded on the Council's definitive map, as shown by a bold black line on the plan on your screen now. It is a passing from a point at Higher Lane at point A, through a field to the south, which is intended to be developed, to reach the track at the rear of Beaufort Avenue, point E. And that's where footpath MU5 continues, but that is not affected by this application. In order to accommodate the development, the applicant is seeking to divert the footpath along a route shown on the broken black line on the plan. Implementation of the proposed development is reliant on the public footpath diversion application and the subsequent diversion order being confirmed. If the application fails, then the planning permission cannot be currently implemented without interfering with the public's right of way. In line with the Welsh Government guidance, the Council carried out an informal consultation from the 27th of April for 4 weeks to identify potential issues with the proposed diversion. As well as being publicised generally, the consultation was sent to the Ramblers Association, the British Horse Society, Green Open Spaces and Heritage Alliance, Natural Resources Wales, the Byways and Bridleway Trust, the Open Spaces Society, the local member and the Mumbles Community Council, the Gower Riding Club, Cycling UK and the Swansea Civic Society, and no objections was received from any of these bodies. The Council did receive 10 objections, the details of which are contained in the report. The majority of the objections concern issues which were addressed as part of the planning application, so they are not relevant to this application. Most objectors also raised a concern over the safety of the proposed route, as cars will cross the footpath to enter some properties. But this is not considered to be a valid ground of opposition to the order, as there are many examples of public footpaths which are crossed by vehicles who have private rights to access their properties, such as parking bays or people who have driveways at the front of their properties. So this would be a similar situation. If members resolve to approve the diversion order today, then a statutory consultation will then be carried out. And if there are objections to that consultation, then the matter will be referred to Welsh ministers for determination, who will likely hold a public inquiry. If the application is approved today, the existing footpath will increase by a total of 12 metres, from 132 metres to 144 metres. The path will retain the connection between Higher Lane and the remainder of footpath MU5 and will be more convenient for users as it will be surfaced in the future. Currently, it's inaccessible for some users due to its condition. So, in conclusion, the application satisfies the requirements of Section 257, as the proposed diversion is necessary to allow the applicant to implement the planning permission, which has been previously granted by the council. So it's recommended the application be approved and the public path diversion order is made. Later, if objections are received, when the formal consultation process takes place, the matter will then be referred to Welsh Government for determination. Thank you, Chair. Any questions then?
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Are there any questions? No? Sure. Okay, thank you. Well, you can see the recommendation there is on page 8, and that the application be approved and that a public path diversion order be made. And if objections are received to the order, to refer the order to the Welsh ministers for determination. So we will take that vote now.
Yeah. Councillor Matthew Bailey.
For.
Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Phil Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey.
For.
Mary Jones.
For.
Sarah Keaton.
For.
Thank you. Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis.
Yes.
Nicola Matthews.
For.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
And Paul Lloyd.
And 4, thank you.
That's 11 for, 1 against, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And we can now move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is the determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. And the first item on our agenda is that Trehavert in Cocket. And David, that's yours. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, item 1 on the agenda, application for Trehavert, which is a detached property situated at the entrance to Kevin Coyd Hospital site. Arrow in. There we go. So you can see it's in the middle of the Google image. And I think the next slide goes on to there we go. Yes, that one. Yeah. Okay, so the property was probably constructed or was constructed as part of the main Kevin Coyd Hospital campus and has recently been used in association with the hospital for health clinic uses under Class D1. So the application is essentially for a 2-storey side extension, demolishing the existing side extension to the eastern elevation, and a change of use from existing health clinic building to a residential women's centre under Class 2A under the use classes order and associated works, and is submitted by the Ministry of Justice. Let's talk about the vehicle access to the site is currently gained. There's a two-way system, a one-way system at the minute. So it's obviously got access off the existing entrance into the hospital, which will be retained, and there's an exit which comes straight out onto 1 Arloyd Road, which will be blocked up as part of the proposal. So obviously the entrance will, the site will be obtained from the main hospital site as illustrated there on the site plan. Okay, so the application consists of the demolition of the existing extensions to the property, principally the existing 2-storey side extension on the eastern elevation and some smaller other extensions which allow the construction of the larger 2-storey side extension. On the update sheet, you'll notice there was a frequently asked questions pamphlet and also a letter issued from the Ministry of Justice, which gives you further background information on the precise use. So obviously the details of that are within the report, but I'll just summarise briefly to say that basically it's a facility for women currently involved with the justice system, which will be run by the Ministry of Justice, and it'll consist of a 12-bedroom centre which will provide local women who have committed low-level offences an opportunity for rehabilitation and thus avoid going into the custodial system. I think you'd probably be aware that the nearest women's prison to South Wales, I think, is in Gloucestershire at the minute. Okay, so as I say, the Women's Centre will be staffed 24/7, run by the Ministry of Justice, and it'll be in conjunction with the Probation Service. So the centre will not be a prison. It's not intended, and it is intended to provide holistic support for vulnerable women. It's intended to be located in the local community, as the majority of the women are not necessarily from the local community, but certainly part of the surrounding area. So with regard to consultations, obviously there's been detailed responses from our ecology teams, trees, the drainage officers. There's also a detailed response from a designer and crime officer, which goes into quite a lot of detail about how the building should be managed, site security, building security, controlled access, CCTV, lighting, and also a management plan to be put in place. So it's all summarised within the report. You'll notice also that the application has generated quite a lot of local objections from the local community. And I think there's a petition, 122 signatures, 89 separate letters, from 89 separate addresses, and a further 215 letters of objection with 1 letter of support, and further objections from the ward councillors and also a Senate member. And I think on the update sheet, there's some further late representations, including one from Councillor Michael Locke. So with regards to sorry, if you go on to the next, yeah, sorry. So that just gives you an idea. So obviously the footprint of that with the thicker grey line is the existing building, and then the larger rectangular block obviously is the proposed 2-storey side extension to the proposed building. I don't know if you can you zoom in on that just to no, okay. So what basically at ground floor there'll be a number of community facilities, shared kitchen, living room area, and then on the upper floor is basically the 12 bedrooms, which will be self-contained with ensuite facilities, etc., for the ladies. So in terms of the principle of development, the site is in a sustainable location. It's within the Cocket community, and it's in accordance with requirements of LDP policy PS1, sustainable places, where development, including community facilities, are required to be directed to the most sustainable locations within defined settlements of the urban area. Also worth noting, as I say, it's within the Kevin Coyd Hospital, and within the local development plan, there is strategic policy which allows for the comprehensive redevelopment of the Kevin Coyd site. That's changed slightly. It was to be a residential-led mixed-use development with retained health facilities. The emerging proposals coming forward from the health board is that they want to retain quite a big chunk of that, so the area for redevelopment will be much less than what was originally intended. This site, whilst it's within a strategic area, it's not part of that wider proposed development, and it's within the actual green space. So as part of that, it was intended that this building will be retained as part of that overall development. So it doesn't prejudice the long-term aspirations of the Kevin Coyd strategic site. And in terms of putting a secure residential use at this site in planning policy terms, in land use terms, it's deemed to be acceptable, and there's no reason why that should be refused in the nature of this setting, having regard to the context of the site. In terms of the placemaking visual impact of the development, as I say, the original property is quite a large, detached, attractive property. The character was eroded somewhat with the more recent extensions to the building, which will be demolished. And as you can see on the screen, the replacement two-storey side extension is slightly larger than the existing extension on the site. And it's quite, as you can see, it's got quite a contemporary theme to it. And what the architecture has attempted to do is try and break up the elevations, to break it down, to make it get more of a domestic scale, more suitable to the use rather than to look like a residential institution. So in terms of placemaking visual impact, the proposal is deemed to be acceptable and would have an acceptable impact on the character on the host property. As I say, it has generated quite significant objections from the local community. In terms of the siting, we saw the siting at the start of the presentation. It's obviously opposite the properties on 1 Lloyd Road. The boundary abuts the property to the east, which is Badger's house, I believe. But the distance to those properties is in circa 50 metres. So in terms of the physical impact of this development, then the site-in relationship is deemed to be acceptable. As I say, there are concerns from the local community in terms of the use and associated building and associated issues. However, it has to be recognised that the lawful use of the building generated its own activity in terms of the previous health use of the building. As I say, there are concerns that the use would generate crime and antisocial behaviour, but obviously in terms of planning use, it's deemed to be acceptable and subject to strict adherence to the management of the facility. This is deemed to be acceptable. The facility would be enclosed with a 2-metre high fence enclosure, but as I say, it's not intended to be a prison. It's not intended to keep the residents in. They will have rights of freedom to come and go. The fence is more to do to keep people out rather than keep people in. From a highway safety point of view, there are no highway safety or parking issues. The site will propose 7 car parking spaces directly for the staff. The residents won't have cars on site, so all access will be controlled. And there are no issues from that point of view. As I say, the existing access on 1 Lloyd Road will be closed off. So in terms of the principle of the use, it's deemed to be acceptable. There's no detrimental visual residential amenity aspects, and the issues regarding ecology, trees, drainage, highway safety are all covered within the report. I would draw your attention to the update sheet where there are some recommended revisions to some of the wording of the planning conditions. So the recommendation is for approval with the conditions subject to the revision on the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Now we have 4 speakers representing the residents, and the first one on my list is Helen Jones.
Thank you. Can I just take this opportunity to thank the chairman and the members for giving us this opportunity to speak today. It's important for those empowered in making this decision today to understand the community where this application is proposed. We're a long-standing residents, generally made up of elderly, young families with children, and there's some individuals under community treatment orders for mental health conditions. These people represent the most vulnerable in society, and the health and well-being and safety of these people should be the panel's paramount consideration when deliberating this application today. The MOJ said they considered several sites across South Wales and decided that Treharvard was the most suitable. Sites considered in Newport and Bridgend went out to public consultation, but after significant local opposition was scrapped. The sites were not purchased nor planning applications submitted. The MOJ said that they were told to do things differently with Treharvard site, and indeed they did just that. They purchased the site, then sought government funding and submitted a planning application. There was no public consultation seeking our views, and only 2 houses were notified of the planning application by letter, others just ignored. Residents only found out about the proposed development from Wales Online, which showed a picture of Treharvard. The location was undisclosed and still is. Residents had to create leaflets to inform the wider community. This does not demonstrate openness and transparency from the MOJ. We followed the planning process, submitted our applications in vast numbers along with a petition, Our objections briefly cover privacy issues. It's close to residential properties and overlooked. Parking problems. There's significant issues on Wanala's Road. It's already congested. This unit will bring more issues. Few amenities in the area. Closest shop is a mile away. Bus service infrequent and unreliable. And the proposed location is 50 metres away from a pub. Many offenders have background of alcohol and drug misuse. The MOJ presented plans for the site, but failed to address what benefit the service brings to the local community and what impact it will have upon its vulnerable members. Offenders will have met the custody threshold, yet are able to wander amongst vulnerable adults and children. Offenders will have been assessed for staying at Trehavard, adhering to strict conditions whilst there, or risk imprisonment, but it's clear the offenders have little regard for the law, as prison was not a deterrent before. Statistics show reoffending is high, so what is the difference now? The planning application itself has already had a detrimental effect on the community. Elderly residents live in fear of increased crime, parents concerned for the safety of their children walking to school. One resident has seen their house sale fall through when they were looking to move into a supported living complex. There's additional concern that those suffering with mental health conditions will be at risk of exploitation of other crimes from offenders. The MOJ cannot provide any assurance to residents regarding their safety, and as a result, to attempt to do so would be negligent, placing vulnerable people at risk. Our objections to Trehavard site demonstrate that this proposal and its use is unsuitable for our area, as it will have a significant impact on the community, risking our health, well-being and safety. We do not oppose the idea of a secure unit for female offenders. We oppose it in this populated community of vulnerable residents. We elect our councillors to do the right thing. We put faith in you to support us and ensure our views and concerns are clearly heard and considered. We now as a community need the help of our elected councillors now. So now is the time to do the right thing. Please put the needs of the many that will be significantly impacted by this over the needs of the few offenders. Your actions today will be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then my second speaker is Liz McWilliams. Thank you.
Okay, firstly, I would like to say that there has been no consultation with local residents regarding this development until the drop-in centre, and the lack of information has already had a detrimental effect on the well-being of the community. Whilst we're not against this provision for women, we are concerned as to the siting of this development. Trehavard is situated in a quiet residential area in close proximity to 4 schools. There is a pub within 200 metres, which doesn't appear conducive to try and rehabilitate someone with addiction issues. The MOJ state that the building cannot be seen from the road. I think you've got some pictures that I passed over. Picture 1 is taken from the steps of Trehavard looking across the road. Picture 2 is taken from the bedroom window of the house looking towards Trehavard, and it can be clearly seen from there that you can see into Trehavard and they can see into this house. Residents and visitors to the site would be encouraged to ride a bike or use public transport. Trehavard is situated at the top of a hill, and to ride a bike to and from would be extremely difficult. The local bus runs every 2 hours, Monday to Friday, with no service at weekends. The building is also to be accessed daily by those who are in the judicial system, which will undoubtedly increase traffic and noise. So besides a residential centre, it will be a day centre. And then there's picture 3, I think you've got, which actually shows the level of transport on Manaloy Road on a normal day. The MOJ state that this is not a prison. However, we are extremely concerned by some of the proposed features for this development, such as security fencing at least 2 metres high, extensive CCTV in an elevated position, elevated security lighting to be used all through the dark hours, a safe room for reception staff to protect against risk of violence or aggression from residents or visitors, and a large security gate. This will most definitely have the look and feel of a prison. It is clear to see that the MOJ anticipate that various forms of violence and crime will be committed around this building by the measures that are being put in, and the features outlined may protect staff and the building's residents but do absolutely nothing to protect the local residents. In the agenda, the planning department state that although the proposed use is not necessarily desirable for residents, then surely what they are saying is that it would be out of character to have a secure residential institution in the middle of a quiet residential area. At the drop-in centre, it was said that the likely success rate of such a project, based on information gathered, would be approximately 5%. This equates to 2.5 women per annum working on full capacity. Does this justify the mental and psychological impact this centre will have on local residents? And from this, it could be assumed that 95% will reoffend. Where will they reoffend? In the building, in the community? Finally, I would like to point out that this facility is right opposite a kids' cancer charity, where they intend on having a sensory garden for these terminally ill children. Can you imagine being a parent of one of these children who are making memories in this garden overlooked by offenders? It truly beggars belief that anyone with any compassion could suggest that this is the right place for such a development. Our homes are meant to be our sanctuaries where we feel safe, secure and relaxed. We no longer feel this way. Chairman and members, I cannot emphasise how stressed, worried and at risk we have felt as a community over the past 4 months. And we will continue to feel like this until we are assured that this development will not go ahead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And if you just switch your mic off, please. Sorry. And then the next speaker is Alan Cunningham. Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here today to ask on behalf of the community of Cockett to throw this application. To place the development of this nature in a residential setting is sheer lunacy. This development, if it goes ahead, is only roughly 1.1 miles away from the appalling scene of the Mayo riots. And why is that? Because it's the culmination of decades of failed liberal ideology and soft justice. It is not just the police who have failed to meet the responsibility to society. The justice system is no longer fit for purpose. And we do not want a repeat of this in the Cockett community. Soft sentencing policies, a judiciary out of touch with the public, and prisons that offer better living standards than available to people on universal credit or pensions. All of this gives the message that the victims don't matter. We have people in our community who have suffered from abuse and have been threatened with violence for well over 3 years, all carried out by drug-dealing, fueled scum. Put in this unit or prison where the powers to be are suggesting is tantamount to pouring petrol on open fire. People have struggled to build and enhance their homes through many years of hard work and financial constraints, for it to be marred by this ugly development. We, the residents, do not want this in our community, and neither do the schools or the Children's Cancer Unit or the Special Referral School. Neither do we want our children and grandchildren or our old age pensioners scared to walk the streets. Having a unit or prison of this type is bound to put further pressure on the emergency services which cannot deal with the current problems, mainly through a lack of manpower and the offender using the system. If you want this development to go ahead, please return to the drawing board and the other sites that you visited, but we don't want it here. We as a community want to kill the seeds of the drug menace that exists in our community at present and stop the same from happening here. You say it couldn't happen here. Yes, they said that about the Mayo riots. Prevention is better than cure. And Ministry of Justice, members, some justice to the residents of Cockett is due. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My final speaker from Objectors is Stuart Owen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear very much of what I had to say has been brilliantly covered by my colleagues on my left. But there are two very important legal points that I need to cover. I am a former planning officer myself. Much has been made in mitigation of this proposal that the premises would be for women only. Officers have not sought to place a planning condition to that effect, and I understand why. Planning law cannot make such a distinction. You cannot restrict on grounds of gender. So efforts to make the proposal softer and more innocuous have perhaps misled the public. And the reality is that, dependent on need at the time, purely in planning terms, this facility could be all male, all female, or mixed from the very day it opens. The second point, and perhaps even more significantly, and I know the officer touched upon this earlier, but the actual planning officer who wrote the report states that if approval is granted and implemented, then thereafter the site could be used without any further planning permission at any time for any other purpose in the same planning use class. And some examples of that planning use class are, contrary to the officer's comment, a prison, a young offenders institution, or a short-term holding centre. That is the nature of the beast you are dealing with today. It's been touched on that two other authorities in South Wales have previously dismissed this proposal, and why indeed should it be acceptable in Cocket when, as has already been said, the planning officer's comment said it's not necessarily desirable for residents. Absolutely right, it's not. There is no doubt about that. The last paragraph in summation, Chair. The people of Cocket, overwhelmingly in number, fear and object to the effect this proposal will have on their lives and the community. They are pinning their faith in the members of this planning committee to understand those fears and put the interests of the good people of Swansea first. Please refuse this planning application.
Thank you very much. And now is from the applicant, Chris Jennings. Chris, thank you. When you, there you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to explain why I think that if approved, this application will be positive for Swansea. As you say, I'm Chris Jennings. I'm the Executive Director for Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service in Wales, responsible for all prison and probation delivery across Wales. I'd like to start briefly with the context of why we're here. We're making this application today because there is persuasive evidence that offending behaviour is more effectively managed through a community sentence than by sentencing women to short spells in prison, which is what happens all too often now. We know that that can have a damaging impact on the women and the community, the children and their wider family. For several years, we've been working closely with the police and other partners in this part of Wales to take a more intelligent approach to women who come into contact with the justice system. And the first priority is to reduce reoffending so there are fewer victims of crime. That's the objective here. Instead of time in prison, we want to give these local Swansea women the chance to turn their life around. And we know that this approach might be able to break that intergenerational cycle of crime. And the Residential Women's Centre in Wales is an important step in realising that vision and is a substantial investment by the Ministry of Justice to give women in Swansea a chance and to help the wider community in your city. At the heart of our search for a suitable site for the Residential Women's Centre has been identifying where the need is greatest, where we can make the biggest impact in terms of turning women's lives around and improving communities. Our analysis suggests that in Swansea, there are a higher number of women sentenced to short-term custody than elsewhere. And while sentencing is, of course, a matter for the judiciary, we know that sending women to prison for a short term does not necessarily lead to long-term best outcomes. These women are often experiencing difficulties linked to adverse childhood experiences, mental and physical health problems, substance abuse and poverty. And it is those factors that are driving their offending behaviour. Taking them out of their community, sending them to a short-term custody in Eastwood Park and then bringing them back again is not what's going to help them in the long term. We've had success with the Women's Pathfinder in South Wales, working with professionals, charities and community groups to tackle the factors that led a woman into offending and turn things around. And we're confident that by providing extra community-based support for these women in this centre, it will help them address their offending needs and turn them away from a life of crime, which is surely what we all want. And the benefit there is not just for the women, but for the wider communities and the victims of the crime as well. Over the last 2 years, we have worked closely with partners, including the Welsh Government, the Police and Crime Commissioner, local authorities and third sector organisations to find a suitable geographical location and site for the centre. We've carried out extensive analysis across Wales, which has resulted in us in identifying Swansea as a suitable location. We wanted to ensure that the centre was based in an area where there are a large number of women who will benefit from this service, and in a local authority area that is progressive in supporting vulnerable people and taking an alternative approach. Swansea fitted that objective. The criteria for the site included affordability, of course, accessibility, access to existing services, and meeting the requirements of the centre in terms of setup and operation. As has been mentioned by others already today, we've looked at lots of other sites across South Wales, and this met the criteria in the best way and will deliver a therapeutic space for the women who would reside there. As members will be aware, this is a full planning application for the change of use of Trehaford, which was previously a children's mental health unit, to a women's centre with a 12-bed residential unit. And that will provide women who have committed low-level offences with specialist support to address the root causes of their offending. The applications follow detailed and very constructive pre-application discussions with your officers over a number of months, and the proposal presented represents the outcome of a positive collaboration between local partners across Swansea. I want to be clear, the residential women's centre is not a prison. It will be a small home for 12 women who will stay for up to 12 weeks at a time, and it will provide day services for a small number of other women in the local community. These are local women. Many of these women, as I've mentioned, have been victims of abuse and trauma and will benefit from the enhanced support offered at the centre, including therapy, counselling and other support. Evidence shows that removing women from their local community and from their local support networks to serve short sentences does not help them address their offending behaviour. So it doesn't cut crime, it doesn't help victims. Hosting the residential women's centre in a community setting near to where women already live is an opportunity to enable local women to stay closer to those who support them in a safe environment, so they can focus on the task of making positive changes to their lives, reducing their reoffending and reintegrating safely back into their communities. I've heard what's been said about the fact that people don't feel consulted on our proposals. In fact, we are confident we have followed the required statutory and local authority planning guidelines in relation to local community consultation. And in addition, we have taken non-statutory additional engagement with local councillors, both cabinet and ward level. And also, as was mentioned by my people over on my right, local residents, we arranged a local drop-in centre as well to listen to residents and provide them with information about it. We've prepared a FAQ document, question and answer document, which we shared with local councillors. We've handed out at the drop-in centre. We've emailed to local residents, and it's on the internet. We've done as much as we can to make people aware of what we're trying to do. There have been suggestions there would be potential risk to public safety and unsocial behaviour. Everything that is at the heart of this proposal is about the opposite. It's about providing a positive, community-focused environment which will encourage pro-social behaviour and reinforce the benefits of cooperation. Women won't reside at this centre unless they've committed to do so. It will be in their interests to behave whilst they're with us. And of course, we are used to managing these sorts of places and have a lot of skill in doing so. I don't recognise the 5% figure that was mentioned by representatives over there about in terms of success. I've never heard that before, and I believe it was mentioned. I'm not for a moment disputing it was mentioned, but I don't recognise it, and it's not a figure I would hold any store in whatsoever. I've also met with the children's charity locally as well, and had a very constructive conversation with them about how we can be good neighbours to them too. The centre, personally, I met with them. The centre will be managed 24/7 by experienced and highly trained probation staff. There will be high levels of security and safety around, but that's not just for the residents. That's as a deterrent to anybody else who thinks they might want to cause any mischief locally. There will be a strict no alcohol, drug and behaviour policies in place. And if those policies are broken, there will be consequences for them. The experience of running other residential settings in Wales, albeit because we don't have a women's centre in Wales at the moment, the only examples we have are for high-risk men, is that where we do have those centres, and there's one in Swansea, that antisocial behaviours are very uncommon, and we are extremely experienced at managing those, and obviously have close relationships with the police should we need to liaise with our partners to resolve any issues that do arise. We've worked proactively with the council through the determination of this application to positively respond to the technical issues raised. The case officer's report sets out there are no outstanding technical issues that are not capable of being dealt with by way of a suitably worded condition, all of which we're happy to work with. The classification of the application C2A understandably has raised some concerns because that classification, as pointed out by the gentleman, does include more secure units. I can't help the classification. It wasn't my choice to recommend that classification. That's the classification that fits within the planning policy. But there is absolutely no intention for us to do anything else with it other than the proposal that's here today. We don't have any such thing as a mixed site for men and women anywhere in England and Wales. That doesn't exist. It's impossible. We wouldn't be able to do that even if we wanted to within our own policies. You may not be able to restrict it within planning policy, but I can restrict it from the Ministry of Justice policy perspective. We don't have mixed units. And there is no intention at all to turn it into a male unit. This is built specifically for the purpose set out. And I'm happy to consider any further conditions the committee may wish to place on us to restrict that use, because that's absolutely, we're happy to sign up to that. Our plans for the centre are that it should feel like a home for those who live there, and our designs reflect it. We want to be a good neighbour to the community, and I want to assure any residents who fear the centre might look and feel like a prison, that is not what we intend. We're aiming to provide a place that supports rehabilitation and positivity that appeals to the residents and will deliver the right outcome for local women. We will continue, if successful today, to work in partnership with the local community to address any issues they might have as we move forward. I hope that my statement has provided some useful additional information, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present it. Thank you, Chair and members.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I got two of your ward councillors wishing to speak. My first member is Councilman Gatrick. He would be opportunity to speak now.
Yeah, I won't obviously rehash what everyone said. I would just reiterate what some of the residents have said. Actually, for the members who are less familiar with the area, some of those houses on Arwyth Road will have very good views of this site, and I think there are lessons to be learned on consultation with the residents. I think we've certainly learned some, and I think there are some for the councils and certainly some for the Ministry of Justice as well. There's three things I'd maybe want to highlight. Firstly, this is a secure facility, obviously, and when you read the comments from the designing out of crime officer, there are features in there which are going to affect visual amenity, so lighting on pylons, things like that. This is going to have to be very, very sensitively done if it's not going to interfere with residents who really are very close opposite. Secondly, the parking and traffic, as was mentioned, I don't think public transport is as good in that area as people seem to think it is. I certainly, as somebody who used to rely on the bus for transport, I certainly don't think you could run staff 24/7 in a facility like that with public transport. And I don't see many people walking there either. So just bear in mind that there may be some optimistic assumptions there. And finally, just with reference to the local development plan, it is in the SDF area. It isn't where we're going to put houses or anything, but it is in an area which was designated, at least on the plans that I saw, as a key area of public access green space. And whatever the rights and wrongs of this, that's not going to be a public access area for sure. I think all the other points have been made by the residents, so I won't belabour it, but just for the members of information there.
Thank you very much. And then the councillors, Councillor Dirk.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank local residents for coming along? People online might not be able to see that we've got the speakers here, but we've also got a good number of people in the gallery. If all the objectors had come here, this chamber would be rammed. It really would be packed out. These are the views of myself and my two colleagues on my left, the three Cocket councillors. We are united in our perspective. We do share the vast majority of concerns from residents, though not some of them. This should not be moved to Town Hill, let's be clear about that. We knew about this proposal when it was announced publicly. There was no opportunity for early engagement about this application. We, as councillors, shared this on Facebook, and the Ministry of Justice responded. We did, as Mr Jennings said, have a meeting in the Guildhall on the 16th of June, and things moved forward from then. The proposal is recommended for approval. We think this would absolutely be a mistake. We think that it should be rejected, and I will explain in detail in a bit more. If it is approved, we ask the committee to agree to the following condition, picking up on what Mr Jennings said. Many residents and local businesses are planning to have dropped curbs, improved security, CCTV, better doors and windows, etc. No one should be out of pocket by this proposal. And we ask that the MOJ create a community fund of £100,000 to support these out-of-pocket costs for people who are terrified by what might happen to their community. No one should be out of pocket. The aim is not to duplicate what other people have said, but to add value. There might be some duplication of what I'm saying, but that will just serve to re-emphasise our perspective of these fundamentally important points. An attempt is made here to link comments to relevant planning considerations and to the officer's appraisal, which starts at page 40 of the agenda pack with 4 key planning issues. So I'm going to focus on the 4 key planning issues. Principal use converted from health clinic to residential women's centre, D1 to C2A. Placemaking, visual amenity, impact on neighbouring and future occupiers, and parking and highway safety impacts. So I'll say what our points are. I will start in with point number 1. Our first point. This is not a matter of not in my backyard thinking. It really isn't. A lot of objectors have said we like the principle, the ideas, Chris. We're not opposed to that. We've got here 30 years of working with vulnerable people in our councillor team in Cocket, most vulnerable people in society. This is the wrong place for this. The risk is that this secure residential accommodation will have a seriously detrimental impact on the Cocket community. On page 42, the importance of local delivery plan policy PS2 is highlighted. Planners must aim to create attractive, legible, healthy, accessible and safe environments. As a quote here, all proposals should ensure that no significant adverse impact would be caused to people's amenity. You can't say this won't have a negative impact on local people's amenity based on the officer's evidence provided. Says, the report goes on. It may be the case that the proposal could see a rise in crime and antisocial behaviour, given the nature of use and the history of the occupants. Arguably, this is the biggest fear. This is what we're all most worried about. We should also remember that the Excellent Kids Cancer Charity is right next door. Quite shockingly, the report continues, quote, again, any antisocial behaviour that occurs in the local area is a matter for the police. So we're acknowledging there's an issue and we're saying the police can deal with it. What kind of planning is this? Residents will be most affected, and then the suggestion is that we will pass the buck on to the police. This reads like we know there are risks, but we're going to ignore them. Based on the appraisal's own conclusion, or I mean by the appraisal, the officer's appraisal in the report, own conclusion of the likely rise in antisocial and criminal behaviour and the risks to residents' amenity, the plan should be rejected. Second point, I get shorter as we go on, so please, bear with me. We are referring here to page 25 and page 40 of the agenda pack. On the map of the local development plan, We have red, as we saw earlier, indicating the Kevin Coyd strategic development area, and green indicating the site of importance for nature conservation, the sink area. This is a huge green wedge and extends across a few wards. The local health board had a plan to build 371 houses and other facilities on the Kevin Coyd site, which led to the strategic development area categorisation. The local health plan, as the officer said, the local health board have changed their plans and intentions for the site. Wales Online, the 2nd of February 2022, there was a good article about this. The site should be recategorised as part of the sink green wedge. That's the logic of where we are in 2022 about this important area. We saw how the area looks from the sky. It is a rural community. The local health board intends to redevelop the existing hospital grounds footprint. In a few positive meetings with the local health board recently, I attended 2 officers at senior management and director level. There was enthusiastic discussion about community engagement on this site with shared ideas about environmental initiatives, allotments, etc., bringing benefits for education, health, well-being, education, training and jobs. That's early days, I know, but that could well be the future of this very important semi-rural site in Cocket, Sketty, Wards, Wanarloedd, all the way going down to Gowerton. We're talking about a huge green wedge here. That's in keeping with that area now, and we won't have 371 houses. Third point, why is C2A secure residential accommodation required for women who pose such a low risk? Why not C2 residential instead? What guarantees are there that probation will only recommend and the court will only approve vulnerable women for placement and not consider anyone with higher level offences? Courts are in crisis. Will this be a dumping ground? Could this be used for alternative secure purposes in future, as was said earlier? A young offenders institution, perhaps? Chris said there's not going to be any change. We are assured this is the case. We had a new Prime Minister yesterday, Chris. We're having a new Minister today, no doubt. We cannot make those assumptions in this chamber. All bets are off. The plan clarifies the high-level security arrangements which will be in place. But why? Why such high security? I used to work in a security unit in Gwaun-Cai, Gerwin, you might know, a nice village. From the street, the detached property looked just like all the other houses in the community. Didn't look like a security unit at all. The police are clearly very concerned. Page 31 to 36, the design and out crime officer really alarmed me when I read it. And the report goes to town on the potential issues. We could see here huge super security fencing with an automatic security gate of the same height, this huge 2 metre high. That's what we're talking about. Huge automatic gates there right on Wanarloedd Road. High pole security lights looming over Wanarloedd Road and the houses. A safe room for staff. Point 34 on page 35 even says that doors will need protection against ram raiding. Who are the troublemakers going to be if the women will be such low risk? Fourth point, reference to page 29 about placemaking and visual amenity. We must work within planning frameworks, all of us. Areas need protecting and enhancing. This proposal neither protects nor enhances. In fact, it creates risks to a very settled community. Good design makes better places. 3.3 on this page says good design is fundamental to creating sustainable places. Cocket is a sustainable place now. Cocket has evolved over 100 years. It is sustainable, welcoming, settled, semi-rural, with some of the lowest crime rates in Swansea. Cocket 4, the statistical area Cocket 4, is actually ranked out of every community in Wales, number 1,053 out of 1,909 on the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation for Crime and Community Safety. That makes it one of Swansea's safest, most settled communities, statistically. A sustainable place has already been created. Why are we playing Russian roulette with its future? My fifth point, currently as you walk or drive up Wanarloedd Road, you pass the Cocket Inn, and as the road bends to the right, one of the best local pubs in Swansea, I hasten to say, for a lovely community feel, you come across the mature trees of Trehavard on the left as you go up the hill. In future, many of the trees will be gone. And you will face high pole security lights, high level security fencing and automatic gates. We are told there's not a prison. Chris alluded to this. It is a residential women's centre. But in what kind of institutions do we normally see such high level security measures? This facility will certainly have the appearance of a prison, no matter what the sign out the front will say. That will have a terrible visual negative impact on the visual amenity. Key issue 3, impact on neighbouring and future occupiers. 6 point, reference to page 28. Affordability is an odd stipulation for a facility to house 12 people and a budget of £10 million. That's nonsense. It is, there's £10 million makes a lot of things and a lot of options affordable. It is not on a bus route and therefore it's not accessible, as my colleague to my right said. And there are no existing services other than one the residents should never enter, the Cocket Inn. 7th point relating to page 29, 3.4, design is an inclusive process. Raise public aspirations, reinforce civic pride and create a sense of place and help shape its future. This proposal has had so far and will continue to have the opposite effect on all counts. This is such a shame for a great community, a community which rallied a few years ago when the owner of the Cocket Inn was intended to sell this important community hub, a community which has evolved over time through the efforts of local people, a long line of elected members, business owners, the health board, and so many others. People feel excluded and disregarded. This is not in keeping with the aims and aspirations of planning policy. Key issue 4, our 8th point, parking and highway safety. The application states there will be 6 car parking spaces and 1 for a minibus. There will be 12 residents at a time, 4 times a year, who will not be allowed vehicles. There will be additional day users. How many? Thank you, Chair. Last look, 1 minute. There will be a staff team of probation officers, reception officers and other support staff. Far too many to fit into 6 car parking spaces, and so whatever highways say when Olive Road will be even more congested than it is now. We're told there'll be strict visiting guidelines. Visitors will be expected to use public transport or bicycles. Good ideas, but completely unrealistic and impractical. At visiting times, or for that matter, random times of the day, what's preventing 12 cars turning up to visit 12 women? Have you tried controlling people who've lived chaotic lives? You can't. It's very challenging. It's very difficult. They don't comply with the rules and the regulations like the rest of us tend to try to do. So residents who enjoy the simple but essential things in life, quiet enjoyment of their homes and community, daily walks, will simply have risks in their community which do not exist today. The residential amenity will be significantly damaged. Chair, to conclude, we ask the committee to agree that this application could have a very significant negative impact on the residents of Cocket. There could be a major detrimental loss of residential amenity in a more safe and settled part of our road. We cannot take these significant risks which planning officers have identified but decided to overlook. On that basis, we ask the committee, on behalf of the constituents we were elected to serve, to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lucy, you had your hand up first.
Can you hear me now, Chairman? Thank you. Well, I just thought that if this was coming into my ward, I'd certainly oppose it, and I think that it'll bring problems into Cocket Ward, and I would think the local members have got it right.
Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just got a question. In the documents which were sent to us by the Minister, I'll just get it up now, on the question and answer session, he says the MOJ understands the concerns of local people surrounding the classification of the application as C2A. There is no intention to move away from this being a residential women's centre, which is reflecting what's been told. And if the local planning authority are minded to recommend to approve the application, then the MOJ will certainly have no objection to the planning committee imposing a restrictive condition on the use of the site, given it reflects our proposals for the site. And yes, on page 44, that is addressed. It's considered that the development does fit within defined use class C2A. On that basis, it is not considered that a condition restricting the use and preventing other uses within Class 2A would meet the tests set out for planning conditions. So my question really is, are we able to restrict the use of Class C2A as the Minister implies? And if we are, why are we not doing so to say that this has to be what we're being told and cannot be the other uses in that class, which we could then exclude, and to ensure that this at some stage does not become something which it is not intended to be at this stage?
Sorry, in a moment, perhaps we can get some answers to that. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Bailey first, and then Councillor Downey.
Thanks, Chair, and I agree with what Councillor Black's just said. But in addition to that, I think it's point number 3 on page 45. It says,
Use the microphone.
oh, it's on. Sorry. Yeah, point 3, page 45 said that if it was granted, the police would agree a operational management plan. Should that not have been put as part of the application instead of something that's done after the horse is bolted as such?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the pre-application and consultation with residents and local members, but that's been answered and that wasn't carried out. So that I know the officers wouldn't know if it went to public consultation, but they did have a private one. So they can just confirm that. And the second thing I had down is exactly what Peter Black just mentioned now. I know it's been done before where we've given planning permission, and when that application ceased to exist, the planning was removed. And that's exactly what I was going to suggest here, is that we could put this down as only this in the class group of 2A, and then nothing else, because as I mentioned before, and I suppose we all looked up what was in that group, and it did have the prison and it had young offenders as well. And I would be more happier if it was down to this particular group. And what else I have? Yeah, can we make some representation on public transport? Because we make a fuss when he comes in here to build for developments about where's the nearest public transport. And we've had a fleeting visit where we've said there is. Residents have said there isn't public transport. And the thing about the lighting and the sensitive lighting, and if they're going to put up floodlights like they got on football and rugby fields, then can I have some explanation of whether it's going to be like that, and do you class that as sensitive? Councillor White, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very concerned listening to what residents have said and local members. Clearly, there hasn't been proper consultation with people that matter. That's the residents. And also, in regards to the issue with the traffic links, this is just a red herring. There's no such bus service. What is non-existent. And as they say, we've got a policy, and it's all around residential impact, and the development of this will cause severe harm to residential impact. And I therefore believe that this application have come forward on basically on costs, never mind the detriment of the people of the local community, and therefore it should not go ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Other hands up to speak now? There are a number of issues there then. David, if you could respond, please.
Okay, there's quite a few questions, I think, about consultation on the application. The first thing I would point out that this isn't a major application, so therefore the normal pre-application consultation requirements don't apply. So there's no requirement on behalf of the applicant to engage in pre-application consultation. I think the drop-in centre has happened, I think, post-submission of the application. So just to confirm that the planning application was publicised in accordance with the statutory legislation, and that incorporated site notices and not many, I'm not sure how many, I think it's in the report, how many residential properties were consulted. But What I would contend was that obviously by the number of objections we've had to this application, then obviously that consultation was deemed to be adequate in terms of making the community aware of the project, and they've obviously had ample opportunity to make representation to us, and they have obviously. There's a question about a number of questions about Class 2CA, isn't it? So I'll read out to you what Class C2A, I think it has been read out, but I'll just clarify that. So Class 2A, sorry, secure residential institution use as a provision of secure residential accommodation, including use as a prison, youth offenders institution, detention centre, secure training centre, custody centre, short-term holding centre, secure hospital, secure local authority accommodation, or use as a military barracks. So the use of secure residential accommodation was deemed appropriate in terms of this application, and therefore, whilst it's been classified as Class 2CA. So we haven't put a condition on to restrict it to use. That is covered in the report. Obviously, if the use was implemented, then in theory, then after that use is implemented, within any of those use classes could be implemented after the use of that building. So there's no restriction as is. We have considered, it was considered with the applicant, and they, as has been mentioned, I think they are agreeable to such a condition. So we didn't, or we haven't put such a condition on because in land use planning terms, all those uses were deemed to be appropriate at this location. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't put a condition if you so wish. So if you were so minded, you could certainly put a condition restricting it to the use applied for and prohibiting use within the wider Class 2A of the use classes order, if you so wished. Is there anything else, Chair?
Yes, you've answered can we restrict, which is Councillor Black's question. Pre-application, yes. Lighting was the other one.
Well, lighting, yes. So lighting's been mentioned, CCTV as well. It's obviously highlighted within the crime prevention officer's report. There are planning conditions with regards to lighting. So, I mean, yes, obviously it needs to be sensitive lit, and all those issues would be controlled through the planning condition. It's certainly not the intention to allow this to have high floodlighting. It would be sensitively lit, and certainly with the objective not only to preserve ecology of the area, but also the amenity of the residents who live opposite, obviously. So it would be low key. Otherwise, obviously, that wouldn't adhere to what is expected of the requirement.
Thank you. So just to make clear, we can put that condition on, yeah?
We haven't recommended within the report, but as I say, if committee is so minded to restrict it, they certainly can. That doesn't, obviously, if such a condition is imposed, and I know it's been mentioned by the applicant that there's no intention to use it for an alternative purpose. That obviously, if there was an application in the future to broaden the use from the use applied for, then obviously we would look at it on its own merits.
Right, that's clarified that. Did you come back in?
And I'm happy to move that condition be applied.
You want to second it?
Yeah, I'm happy to second it.
All right. Before we do anything, what is members' views on? Is there to add that condition? If should we be approved? Matt, sorry.
All right.
Yeah, and then Matthew. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I'll take it as me. That would be helpful because I would be concerned at a future date when, as things are getting desperate, that there is this need to shoehorn people in where they might not be appropriate. The question I would like to ask is, where would these vulnerable women go if they can't go here? I think that's a concern, because once we've shoved them out of that area, where do they go?
be able to come back with that now. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Only a quickie from me. Councillor Downing has mentioned public transport, and there has been some talk about traffic on the wider network. As David has said, it is not a major development and doesn't tick the boxes for any detailed transport work ordinarily. That said, we did request a trip generation exercise to try and compare the existing use with potential use. We've got no concerns in that regard. The proposed use would generate significantly less trips on the network than the extant use. Public transport has been raised. There are bus stops on Cocket Road. I'm aware that, that's mainly weekday services. There is this sort of Town Hill Circular, which is not massively convenient, but it does fall within the recommended walking distances to public transport, to bus stops. So as such, we would have to accept the fact that from that point of view, the site is sustainable. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt. I've got no other hands up wish to speak, no? Okay, so we can see the recommendation is one of approval and with that condition. Yes, so we'll take a vote on that first then. Sorry. Vote on the first recommendation without that condition, yeah? Okay.
Take amendment.
Sorry. That's what I thought, yeah.
Sorry, take the amendment.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, right, yeah. So it's the amended recommendation with that condition. Thank you, Gareth.
Yes, this is a vote on the recommendation in the report along with the additional condition that was suggested by Councillor Black and seconded by Mary Jones about the restriction of use. So, Councillor Matthew Bailey.
Introducing my command.
Peter Black.
Against.
Phil Downing.
Against.
Alan Jeffrey.
Against.
Mary Jones.
Against.
Sarah Keaton.
Against.
Mike Lewis.
Against.
Richard Lewis.
Against.
Nicola Matthews. Mike White.
Against.
Andrew Williams.
Against.
And Paul Lloyd.
Oh,
1 for 11 against. Yeah. So recommendation with the amendment. So we go back to the substantive vote now, which is the recommendation as outlined in the report.
Recommendation as it is.
Sorry, Chair, could you clarify that again? I think we slightly.
Well, the first, somebody moved an amendment to the recommendation, which then has to be voted on first. Yeah. That you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was turned down, which was refusal. Right. So then we go back to the original recommendation.
Yes, sorry, thank you, Chair. Just to step in here. There's been a suggested amendment, so members have taken a vote on that, and the recommendation for approval with the condition added has not been accepted. Under the two-stage voting process, which will be a vote on the original recommendation without the attached condition. So members will now vote on the officer's recommendation in the report. Okay. If members do not approve that recommendation, it does not mean that the application is refused. We'll need to consider reasons for refusal. And I'd strongly suggest that members seek to defer the application after a discussion on the reasons for refusal to give officers time to consider the rationale for them and take some legal advice. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right. Understood. Right. Oh, thanks.
Okay, members. Councillor Matthew Bailey.
Could I vote to defer it, Chair?
No.
Vote against.
Sorry, what was that? Was that?
That was
For,
against.
on, abstain?
Against.
Against, thank you. And Peter Black?
Against.
Phil Downing?
Against.
Alan Jeffrey?
Against.
Mary Jones?
Against.
Sarah Keaton?
Against.
Mike Lewis? Richard Lewis? Nicola Matthews? Mike White?
Against.
Andrew Williams?
Against.
Lloyd? That's 1 for 11 against, Chair.
So now the next stage is reasons for refusal.
Yeah.
And sorry, go on.
I was going to suggest, Chair, that I think the case set up by Councillor Mike Dirk in terms of the adverse impact on residential amenity would be the strongest reason for refusal.
You're saying that we should know.
Thank you, Chair. So I understand that. If other members have any other concerns they want to raise and discuss over and above that, then by all means, please do. As I said, I would request that members seek to defer the application to give officers time to consider, but it's better to do that once we've got a clear understanding of members of planning committee's concerns, given the amount of issues raised. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
I'm just moving the deferment.
Yeah.
Are members in agreement then that
I
we
think, Chair, in terms of the residential amenity, we're talking about the impact on parking, the impact on the on the street scene, lighting, etc. That sort of thing generally, which I'm sure Mike Dirk can give you 7 points in writing.
Yes.
You can have that speech. Thank you. Okay, so are members in agreement then we'll take a vote on that. That is deferred for the officers to consider and come back with. Yeah.
Chair, just as against our policy at PS2 about being about the actual the way about the layout as well and the safe environment.
Yep. Thank you. We can add that in. So do you need to take a vote on? Yeah.
Take a vote on deferment now for for officers to discuss the reasons as outlined during the members' comments and afterwards. So if I can ask again, Councillor Matthew Bailey.
For.
Peter Black.
For.
Phil Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey.
For.
Excuse me, Mary Jones.
For.
Sarah Keaton.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis. Left. Nicola Matthews.
For.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
Paul Lloyd. That's 11 for deferral, Chairman, to establish reason for refusal.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you all and all the residents and everyone who addressed the committee this afternoon, and very much appreciated for your contributions. Thank you. Okay then, members, and The next item on our agenda is item 2 of page 50, the River Towie Quay, and the request for listed building consent. Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Dave's going to go through a presentation for me, which will be on the screen. I'd just like to refer members to the update sheet. You'll see that the resolution should be refer the application to Welsh ministers via CADU. So if we can go to the first slide, please, Dave. Thank you. This application is being reported to Planning Committee as the Planning and City Regeneration Division is both the applicant and the regulatory body. The application site is the River Quay of the former Havard Copperworks, shown in red, and was Grade 2 listed by CADU in 1996. The application is for listed building consent, with a current planning application for planning permission being considered by the council. Listed building consent is sought for the construction of a new pontoon consisting of a steel bridgehead platform with glass reinforced plastic mesh decking fixed to the wall, 4 number glass fibre pontoons, which would rise up and down with the tide, 4 vertical steel guide columns, and a hinged steel bridge, guardrails and gates. If you can go to the next slide, please, Dave. Thank you. This is a Google aerial image. So the site is at the southern end of the Copperworks site on the western side of the Towie, with a Morva distributor road to the west. The White Rock Heritage Park is located on the opposite side of the river. If you can go to the next slide, please, Dave. Thank you. This is a photo of the wall. So the main photo shows a close-up of the wall. The dotted line shows the juncture where the wall was lowered on the northern part to the right-hand side of the screen previously. The bottom right is a view along the path looking south, and the bottom left is a close-up of the top of the wall with concrete behind the coping stones. If you go to the next slide, please, Dave. Thank you. This is the layout plan. Oh, sorry, can you go to the previous one? Sorry, thanks. This is the layout plan shown on an aerial image. So the bridgehead is shown in orange on the right-hand side, which is a gated platform effectively over the river. The green shows the bridge, which leads down to the pontoons. So those are the orange ones with the crosses on, extending in the middle and the centre. The guard railing is shown in red. That will be 1.2 metres in height for circa 77 metres. And the dotted magenta line is the listed section of the wall, with navy dots showing the ladders to provide emergency egress. Go to the next slide, please, Dave. Thank you. These are just the elevations and floor plan. So again, it's a similar layout plan highlighting the bridgehead as hatched and the bridge down to the pontoons at the top. And on the bottom, you can clearly see the guide columns shown in red on the elevation with the pontoons at the river level. If you go to the next one, please, Dave. Thank you. This is an existing and proposed photo montage viewed from across the site, which from the opposite bank, with the existing scene at the bottom and proposed at the top, showing the bridgehead platform, the walkway level and the bridge running down to the pontoons in the water. There'll be railings around the pontoons and the quay. So the consultation includes a press, site and neighbour notification. 2 letters of objection were received in response to the application, raising concern there's been a lack of consultation with other river users, and access should be available for everyone. There have been 4 letters of support and 2 of comment have also been received. As this is a listed building application, section 16.2 of the Planning, Conservation Areas and Listed Buildings Act sets out the statutory requirement in determining applications for listed building consent to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting or any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses. The proposed river pontoon follows dialogue with the Copper Jack Community Boat Trust and Swansea Rowing Club. There's also been extensive dialogue with CADU and informal planning discussions. Taking each element in turn, the railings are proposed for safety reasons with a contemporary stainless steel finish. Finished into modern area of concrete, so there'll be no effect on historic fabric. There'll be more use when the pedestrian cycle link is completed. The bridgehead section would result in the small loss of modern coping, and the bridge would be secured when not in use behind gates. So there's limited impact on historic fabric. The pontoons would have 2 sections, with the top one for community boats and the bottom one for rowing boats, secured by those 4 number steel stanchions. Again, limited historic impact. The path lighting and ladders would also have minimal impact, and overall, the Strategic Planning and Placemaking Officer supports the proposal subject to the conditions outlined in the report. So overall, the proposed pontoons, bridgehead and railings are welcomed. Whilst they have limited direct effect on the historic fabric, they will be obviously contemporary additions to the frontage as an emerging heritage-led destination. This emphasises the river's relationship with the copperworks, improves interpretation and experience of the site, supports increased use of the river, and also allows the Grade 2 quay wall to be seen close up from river level. So overall, the proposal is considered acceptable, and it's recommended that the application is referred to the Welsh Ministers, notifying Cadw of the intention to grant listed building consent subject to the following conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Indeed. Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Remember, Councillor Downing.
Chairman, nothing to do with planning, more than likely, but this is exciting for Swansea. It's linking the city centre up to the Copperworks and then into the Liberty Stadium if they so desired. A big boost for tourism. I think I was told many years ago that we did have a river taxi in Swansea that had nowhere to go, and it ended up in Cardiff, as most things do. But hopefully, once the pontoon is put in, we'll have the taxi back and many others. Thank you, Chair.
Indeed. And you, Councillor White.
Yes, can I say, as the local member and having worked in the Harvard Works, it's a tremendous acquisition to our community. As I say, the area, we obviously, because of the former works that was going there in the area since 1980, did really need investment. And I believe with the introduction of the Penderyn that's going there, and the other, hopefully other site being developed as well. This is going to be a really big benefit to the city and county of Swansea, and as I say, I look forward to when they're in place and when we can get the river taxis up and down the river there. Thank you, Chair.
Indeed, thank you. My apologies. I should have called you first as Wardman, but no, I do apologise. Any other member wish to speak? No. Okay, you can see the recommendation there is on page 63 is one of approval for the listed building consent. Can we take a vote on that now?
Councillor Matthew Bailey.
4.
Peter Black. 4. Bill Downing.
4.
Alan Jeffrey.
4.
Mary Jones.
4.
Sarah. She's left, Chair. Mike Lewis.
4.
Richard is gone. Nicola Matthews.
4.
Mike White.
110% for.
Andrew Williams.
4.
And Paul Lloyd. Unanimous vote, Chair.
Light comes on.
Unanimous vote for that. And other item then that we come to is on item 3 on page 65, which is over to the baling plant and tip treasures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to refer members to the update sheet again. You'll just notice there's an unfinished sentence in the report, so that is completed on the update sheet. And go to the site location plan, please, Dave. Thank you. So the application has been reported to the Planning Committee as a technical departure to the development plan. The application site comprises 2 separate parcels of land used by tip treasures within the Swansea Enterprise Park. One part is located within the existing car park for tip treasures, accessed off Ferryboat Close, and that's the southern rectangle. The second part is located on the northern side of Ferryboat Close, accessed off the northern spur. So that's the inverse L there. If you can go to the next one, please. Thank you, Dave. These are aerial images from Google of both the sites, with tip treasure shown by the bottom red arrow, with the car parking clearly visible. The northern site appears relatively clear at the moment on the aerial image, but is covered in hard standing and at various times has had various objects on it, as you'll see in the street view photos next. Can you go to the next slide, please, Dave? Thank you. The top left-hand corner shows the entrance into the site from Ferryboat Close, with tip treasures located at the back of the site, indicated in the approximate location of the red arrow. So the main site itself is not visible from the street view. The top right view is a view from a similar location, looking north away from the entrance, with various vehicles and buildings on the northern site. The bottom photo is a view into the northern site from the entrance. So you'll see various skips and containers are visible along the left-hand side. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the proposed layout of the Tip Treasures storage building. So this is the southern site. A new storage building is proposed on the southern boundary, which will result in the loss of several car parking spaces, which are being replaced in the northern section of the site. The building will be prefabricated, measures 3.4 metres in height, 70 metres in length by 5.4 in width, with doors either end and individual doors on the sides. Thank you. You can go to the next slide, please. In terms of the northern layout, there's a new workshop building proposed in green metal profile cladding, which I'll show you next on the next slide, with a covered canopy at the side, along with one large container adjacent to it. The workshop building would measure 3.9 metres in height, 10 metres in depth and 9 metres in width facing into the site. 4 smaller containers, so those are the ones marked with SC on either end and the 2 in the middle, would be located at the rear of the site with covered canopies in between for additional storage. So those are the canopies are the ones just marked with the C. And there are 10 replacement car parking spaces are also proposed for staff. If you can go to the elevations, please. The top left-hand elevation shows the front elevation of the workshop facing into the site, with a building measuring 4 metres in height and 10 metres in length by 9 metres in width. Below this is the rear elevation facing onto Ferryboat Close, with a side of elevations to the right. The bottom left-hand corner shows the typical containers in elevation and on plan form, with the canopies extending between containers shown on the right-hand side in the bottom corner. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is just to show the flood maps, the development advice maps, which shows that the site is located within zone C1 in the dam maps, as is the remainder of the enterprise park. So this is just to give you a bit of an indication of the current situation with regards to the enterprise park. There have been no letters of objection received from residents, no objections from local highways authority, pollution control or drainage officer, and the visual impact is considered acceptable within the mixed use enterprise park. So the key issue is flooding, and Natural Resources Wales has objected with regards to the proposal, as the site is within a C1 floodplain, as I said, along with the majority of the floodplain, so that's in green on the site, which means it's supported and protected by flood defences. The application is supported by a flood consequences assessment and utilises 2 flood models, as new modelling will not be available till later in the year. Headline terms, the site would not flood during the 1%, so that's with the 1 in 100 plus climate change event. And one model shows compliance during the 0.1, so the 1 in 1,000 year event. The other, however, shows there would be flooding with depths of approximately 1.76 metres. Mitigation measures are recommended in the form of setting floor levels 300 mil above the external ground level and anchoring the units to the concrete hard standing. So whilst it's recognised that the site does not meet all of the criteria set out in the technical advice note 15, hence the technical departure, the development is on an existing site and is not raising ground levels. The site is only shown to flood in very rare instances as well, the 0.1% event. Allied to this, there are already buildings and storage containers on the site that would need to be removed, and the impact on third parties is not considered significant given existing use. This breach needs to be considered in the planning balance. Development is already at risk and benefits to recycling more materials, saving them from landfill, and the benefits in sustaining the overall enterprise park. The proposal is considered to be consistent with other applications, and there are flood warnings in place, so the impact of flooding is considered acceptable. So the recommendation is one for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Is any member? Oh, Councillor Downing.
Yeah, just one thing, and more than likely I'm 100% wrong. It mentions TAN 15 in a couple of paragraphs, and I thought we hadn't adopted TAN 15. I thought that wasn't with us yet.
The attempt.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, it's there was a TAN 15 that was proposed to come in last year, and it's been deferred till next year. But that was to replace a previous TAN 15 on development of flood risk, which is still in force. And said it more succinctly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. No other member wish to speak then, no? We can say, okay then, folks. So you can see the recommendation, as Andrew said, is one of approval. So we'll take that vote now then. Thank you.
Councillor Matthew Bailey.
For.
Peter Black. Phil Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey,
Four.
Mary Jones,
Four.
Sarah Keaton not present, Mike Lewis,
Four.
Richard Lewis gone, Nicola Matthews,
Four.
Mike White,
Four.
Andrew Williams,
Four.
Paul Lloyd. It's unanimous again, 10-4, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's carried.
It's working
And
now.
that is those items dealt with today of the planning committee. But just one thing, Andrew. This is Andrew's last planning committee in Swansea, and he's moving on to head of planning and building control in Newport. Thank you for everything, Andrew. And 8 years?
8 years.
Yeah.
Minus a day.
All right, then 7 years and 300. No, thank you very much. And your work has been appreciated, and we wish you all the best in Newport.
Thank you, Chair. And if I could just put my thanks on record, because as I said, I've worked here for just under 8 years, and it's been an absolute pleasure. As I said, it's working in a great department with great staff, and the officer-member relationship is brilliant from an officer's perspective. So thank you to the cabinet member, chair, deputy chair, and all members. So thank you on behalf of myself. Thank you.
Well, first, and then